morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Alison Mostowich, and I am the Director of Engagement at Efficiency Canada. I am joining you from Mohkinstsis, which is the Blackfoot word for Calgary, meaning elbow. And in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation within Alberta District 6, and all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. For those of you joining us for the first time, Efficiency Canada hosts Discovery every 2 weeks. And these sessions are meant to bring the sector and people interested in energy efficiency together to learn. So we try to highlight new research, findings from pilots, relevant topics, and new organizations as we have today. So before we get started, just a reminder to everyone that our guest speakers will present for about 20 minutes, and there is a QA box at the bottom of your screen. So if you click on that QA box, you can enter your questions as we go along. And be sure to upvote those questions. If you see a question that you really like and you want to see asked, I typically ask the questions that have the most upvotes. So hit that like button. With that, I am so pleased to introduce our speakers today. We have with us Jessica and Adam from Ishkoday, and that is all I'm going to say because they are going to talk about the organization. And I just want to thank you for being here. And I'm so excited to hear about Anwa and Ishkoday and all the work you're doing. So welcome, Adam and Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with everyone today. I'm just going to start with, I'm a little nervous. I'm just going to start by saying, Ani Bojo, Migaza Indigenous Cause Chichak Dogdem, Nea Shingaming Indonjaba. And I'm coming to you from Saugeen Ojibwe Nation territory, which is located on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario. So how did we get started with the First Nations Energy Sustainability Association? So FNISA, or Ishkoday, as you're going to hear us refer to it, is an Oji Cree word meaning spark or fire. And it was named by one of our board members, David Fiddler. When we talked to him about us wanting to do this work, we went to our board members and said, what is it that this represents? And Ishkoday was the name. So in Ontario, you can't incorporate unless you use an English or French name. They won't accept Indigenous languages for incorporation. So our English name is the First Nations Energy Sustainability Association. So we were incorporated in the province of Ontario on September 23rd of 2023, and it was developed out of the need for more supports and work to be done on energy poverty in First Nations communities. So the Anwa Board of Directors and the Anwa in general has been around for 52 years, and it services income assistance administrators in the province of Ontario. We do training and advocacy work. So our Anwa Board of Directors has been watching this file for some time. Due to the amount of community emergencies we see all the time, the amount of evacuations due to global warming, the amount of house fires in our communities with no explanation as to why, our high costs of both man hours and resources that are being used in delivering social assistance within our membership income assistance offices residing on reserve. So we've been watching this for 52 years. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples that brought us, our board and our staff, to how we started this vision. So we have a university accredited program in partnership with Algoma University, and we've had 450 plus graduates to that program. Well, in 2016, in one of our northern communities, 2 of our graduates passed away in a house fire. And it wasn't just those 2 graduates who were working in their income assistance offices. It was actually them and 3 other generations from their family. So we had a long conversation about that and how we could get involved in doing some work. So just so you're aware, those individuals were really close to our board, obviously, and to our staff. And Anwa actually services 105 communities as members, but all 133 First Nations communities in Ontario, we still provide service if we need to. So that's just one example of why we needed to get involved in this work. And then in traveling to the north, I started with the organization in 2015. I noticed electrical cords running from house to house. And I asked why that was. And they said, well, because the electrical company only comes in twice a year and you either get turned on or you shut off. And if you don't have the money at the time because you might be in arrears, they shut you off and you don't get access to service again for 6 months. So that really bothered me. Those extension cords running from housing units to their neighboring neighbors. So then the other reason is simply because the costs of food in our communities is atrocious. So Onwa's been doing market basket research for the last 2 years, and the costs of First Nations communities, food sources and the food pricing is insane considering that they're rural and remote. I want to actually bring up a slide because nobody understands this until they actually see it. So Adam, can you bring up that one slide?
Yep. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. You see that?
Yep. So do you want to go to the next slide? So this was our market basket measure research from last year, and this is our True North region. So our fly. So a case of 24 water was 24 bottles of water was $61.29. We took a picture of pop, which was $2.99, but if you needed to purchase juice for 1 can was $4.99. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which was on the shelf, and the majority of it was sugary foods for some reason, but that's another story. But Cinnamon Toast Crunch for family size was $13.99. One of the most crazy things to me was 2 chicken breasts, bone in, skin on, $54.16 for 2. So if you have a family of 4, that's 108 and change, $108.32 for 4 chicken breasts. So when I think about that in the context of meeting hydro needs, or sorry, electricity and heating needs, it really bothers me. But just so I don't know if all of you are aware of the rates, but now that you've seen this, and leave the slide up, Adam, I just want to remind people what rates are in the province of Ontario. And I'm sure not much better in other regions because Ontario has some pretty good rates. So basic needs amount, if you're on Ontario Disability Support Program, the basic needs amount for a single is $752. That has to include all of your clothing, all of your food, etc. The max shelter for a single person is $479. A couple for basic needs, $1085, max shelter $753. If you're on Ontario Works or income assistance in the province of Ontario, basic needs for a single, $343, their shelter is $390. So they have to find a place, a secure, healthy place to live for $390. If you're a couple on Ontario Works or income assistance in the province of Ontario, your max shelter is $642. And then if we look at old age security, the max old age security right now is $713.34. And if your income falls below $21,000, you get gains, which is an additional $83 on your check if you're single and $166 if you're a couple. So we brought this up because in the big scheme of things, when you're on fixed or low income, energy poverty becomes a real issue in our First Nations communities when you see pricing like this. Interestingly enough, when we did the first year's market basket measure, our most expensive place in the province of Ontario to live was not the north, but actually was the Kenora Fort Frances region. Anyway, moving back to, do you want to go back to the first slide, Adam, and I'll finish? So how did Ishkoday evolve out of Onwa? Well, Onwa has been delivering low-income assistance energy programs in the province of Ontario to First Nations since the 90s. So specifically, First Nations welfare administrators in the province of Ontario, by delivering these low-income energy assistance programs, it assists them with helping the needs of their ongoing fixed income clients within their communities. So we started with the low-income energy assistance program for Hydro One remotes, and now we deliver the Ontario Energy Support Program, or we're delivering the Ontario Energy Support Program through ONWA as well. And when I'm talking about fixed income in our Ontario Works or our income assistance offices in Ontario, and eventually what we'd like to do is work outside of Ontario as well. I'm not just talking, our income assistance offices don't just work with Ontario Works or income assistance or ODSP clients. They literally see everybody within their communities. So anybody on fixed incomes, CPP disability, working families who just don't bring home enough to meet all of the obligations of their homes. And I have to remind everybody that there's this significant gap in being able to maintain homes in First Nations because of low incomes. It's even harder for First Nations because capital dollars are very limited on reserve, and there's a lack of access to traditional off-reserve mortgages or home repair loans. So even if you have good credit, it's not like it's easy to just go to the bank and get a mortgage or get a home repair loan. It somehow is tied back into your First Nations community for a number of reasons, which we won't get into today. But this means that it's a great deal. So this means that there's a great deal of overcrowding in our communities, which causes additional issues. Your walls deteriorate faster. Certain pieces of your home have to be replaced on a regular basis. There's a significant amount of overcrowding in our communities. So in April of 2023, we had a conversation with both all of our staff, some of our administrators and our board of directors, and we agreed that we needed to do more education on energy efficiency to not only our leadership, but also those frontline workers, but also the clients. We know that global warming has significantly changed the landscape of available heating and cooling options for rural and remote First Nations communities. And one of the discussions there in April was from one of our board of directors who said, Jess, I don't know what we're going to do. We can't get wood in our community anymore, and that's what we heat with. So it was realized, though, that we had all these programs available to First Nation community members and that they were supposed to be able to access them. But what we were finding was that clients were unsure of how to apply, what they might qualify for, how they might get the money up front to pay for the changes and then apply for the programs. And we also found and heard from LEAP and OESP programs and the clients that they didn't understand what net zero meant. They didn't understand how it affected them. They didn't understand how it was going to shape their First Nations communities in the future. So it became apparent that we needed to do something. The other thing is we looked into getting some individuals' energy audits so that they could qualify for programs, and there was no energy auditors available. Out of our 133 communities in Ontario, about 25% are still off-grid. However, Wanapate Power Project in the northwest of the province is adding an additional 15 communities to the grid, which means a higher demand on Ontario's grid. So the new organization was formed. We went and we started writing bylaws and we decided to do this work. So the new organization, or the First Nations Energy Sustainability Association, literally Ishkoday. So Ishkoday was really a dream of the ONWA Board of Directors to assist more individuals within their communities with support for the membership, the income assistance offices we service. The goals of the new organization, and this might take a little while to get there. ONWA had 52 years and we haven't even got a year under our belts. But really our goals are to relieve energy poverty by delivering training and energy programs that benefit First Nations peoples residing on reserves who are of low income or in need, to relieve energy poverty by developing sustainable energy infrastructure to benefit First Nations peoples living on the reserve and who are of low income or in need, to relieve energy poverty by promoting uniform, culturally appropriate training and delivery of energy programs, policies, and practices, and to research, develop, and recommend changes and amendments as they apply towards First Nations people. And finally, to relieve energy poverty by assisting in providing basic necessities of climate control, which promote safe and comfortable living conditions for First Nations people living on reserve. The organization really currently has only 2 staff, and both of us are on loan from our parent organization, Ottawa. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to our policy and research analyst, Adam McLaren.
Money kinawia zinigade vision cause Niashingming Donjaba Wabsheshi Dodem. Yeah, again, thank you for having us here. And yeah, everything that Jess said is true. We are currently the only 2. And as you can tell, the work that Ishkoday is engaging in is very personal to the staff, because like this type of things we see in our communities and we see when we visit other communities. And I'm a relatively new hire, so as of September of 2023, coming on board with this team, I can see the passion that everybody has, and the board, that the passion that they have. They get into this work because they want to help. It's important work, and right away, like I definitely took to it as being important work and being able to help. So some of the interesting things that we got going on through Ishkoday, something that we have to always remember when we do this work is the OCAP standards. So ownership, control, access, and possession of Indigenous data. So we want to make sure that everything that we do is grounded in those standards, and making sure that Indigenous communities can trust us with the data. And we want to raise up the importance of data sovereignty, and especially within the energy sector. Another thing that we've noticed quite early on is that there is a large data gap when it comes to First Nations in the energy sector, how First Nations are using energy, the energy efficiency practices, energy poverty. A lot of this data we know that, some of these conditions are dire, but, the specifics and the raw data enable First Nations leadership to be able to advocate and make changes still needs to be gathered in many circumstances. And I think that this makes our work doubly tough, because Ontario is a huge province. There's such a vast difference in geography, but not only geography, in First Nations communities' experiences within the energy sector. Every First Nation just about has had troubles with energy generation projects, having these projects remove them from their lands, change their landscape, change how they interact with the land. And there's a lot of legacy issues that have come about from that. So for First Nations to really, it's very understandable, and it's very clear why a lot of First Nations might not have the trust, or might not have the willingness to really partner with a lot of different corporations, because the corporations themselves have lots to learn as well. So with our projects that we have going on in our research projects, we aim to fill that data gap. And ONWA is in such a unique position to be able to do this because of the networks that we have within the low and fixed income communities and First Nations, and the people that are assisting them. Another thing that we're working on is the creating energy efficiency training for First Nations assistance employees, as well as the end user, the low and fixed income peoples. So making sure that they understand what net zero is, the things that they can do at home to make their homes more efficient, how to conserve energy. There's such a wide array of different things that people can do. And when folks are in arrears or they're feeling the pressures of life, it can be really, some of these things get pushed to the side, and it's very understandable. Again, if we go back to that slide of seeing how expensive food is, especially in the north, it can make it very, very difficult for people to really imagine themselves adding efficiency to their home when they're just trying to put food on the table. So we have a project that in the works right now called My Energy App, and it's a project that's going to be matching low and fixed income clients in the outset with the existing programs that are available throughout Ontario. Currently, there is no software or program that is developed specifically for First Nations people to be able to access and understand these programs, as there is a wide variety of them with many different application processes, timing. All of it in itself takes quite a bit of time to research and understand and apply. And some of these people need these programs now. So we're hoping to make some of that step a little bit easier with our energy app. And so that's a work in progress. Our energy team, which goes into community to handle OESP and LEAP applications, ISO has been gracious enough to let us into some of their training programs with CIET. So by the end of this year, they'll be certified energy auditors. So every time we come into community, our visits will be a little bit more impactful each time, and we'll be able to go directly to people's homes and give them the services that they really need and the knowledge that they need to make differences in their homes while we're there. As I said before, there's really a wide variety of geographical challenges, social and economic challenges, and there is no one size fits all for First Nations in Ontario. So we're planning right now a case study, and that'll be assisted by Efficiency Canada. Abby, who's a good friend and mentor, should be joining us on that when we can figure out the details. But we're planning to go to a specific First Nation that is having a really hard time with being on the end of 3 different energy grids, and they have their own legacy issues from power generation, and they're having a challenging time, and even with just the reliability of the grid in place. So we're hoping to go and explore that, and I think that is something that I'm hoping that we can do at Ishkoday as time goes on, because there are these very unique and interesting problems within First Nations across Ontario that really do need that individual hard look and be able to figure out solutions for. So we have some really important dates that I'd like you guys to remember. Coming up in October, we have our first annual Fall Assembly, and this is running in conjunction with the Onwa annual Fall Assembly. So Ishkoday is going to be from October 23rd to 24th. We're having registration on the 22nd at the Chelsea Hotel in Toronto, Ontario. I'm just going to bring up the save the date slide for you guys. Can you see this?
No.
Okay, second. Sorry, it's been a while since I used Zoom.
It showed for a second, Adam. It might be just the delay.
Okay.
I can put the dates. Oh, there you go.
There we go. So we have our first annual assembly coming up at the Chelsea Hotel in Toronto. We would love to see you guys there. We're going to be bringing, first of all, the OG Onwa members, all of our First Nations welfare administrators, they get an automatic membership to and pass to the Ishkoday Fall Assembly, the Ishkoday Annual Assembly, and we're hoping to bring them, as well as ISO community champions, First Nations housing workers, as well as energy sector employees and management teams, so that we can kind of come together, learn both sides of the coin there when it comes to energy efficiency practices, but also the cultural competency that's needed to operate in First Nations communities. So definitely save this date. It's gonna be a great time. Every year it's a busy blast, and we have a great time. We have First Nations vendors that we bring in. We rent out basically quite a number of the larger rooms in the Chelsea Hotel. There's food, there's friends, there's chatting. It's going to be great. And maybe we can get Allison to share this on their site a little bit later. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up the things that there's a lot of work that we have going on, and I've probably maybe skimmed over some of it. But again, we're a small organization. We're just starting out, and we have a lot of very interesting work on the table. There's a lot that we really do want to get done, and we're in the process of finding funding opportunities, capacity building, and putting our employees through training. So yeah, I hope you guys follow along with our growth and connect with us in ways that you're able to. And yeah, Chimiwech.
I always say be careful what you wish for, because if you ask for people to follow along and stay connected, sometimes you get lots of requests and have little capacity. Thank you both so much. It's really interesting to understand how Ishkoday came out of Onwa and out of that need. And it sounds like the organizations work really well together and they support each other. So I didn't realize how interconnected they were, and that was really interesting to understand. So again, everyone, please post your questions in the QA. I've got some questions as well. I think you're right. It was just the surface of what you're doing. So I'm curious, Adam, you mentioned at the beginning that the corporations have a lot to learn. I'd love for you and Jessica to just step into that space a little bit more and tell us what you're seeing, as well as if there are a few key actions that people can take that haven't really worked in this space before, what could those be? So yeah, talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think that something that we're seeing is there seems to be almost a timidness when coming and engaging with community, engaging with First Nations, as well as a bit of cultural difference in communication styles. There's been a lot throughout First Nations history. There's been a lot of outside organizations that come into community when they want to change stuff or do research or this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of First Nations are kind of left with the big bill, or they're left with subpar product, or they're left with
no access to data.
No access to data, broken promises. So there really does have to be a cultural change on the corporate side of this, where they really do need to learn the impacts, how that has affected each individual in First Nations, and really get to the root of why it is that they're doing the work and why it is that they're in community. First Nations people, they're not dumb. When they know when people are, trying to make a buck, or trying to sell them snake oils or what have you, right? And the real core at reconciliation is relationships, and being able to understand exactly how it is that First Nations came to be in these current day circumstances, and the roles that government bodies, independent corporations have played in this history. And building that relationship, building that trust, it's going to take a while. And I think that every society, like the mainstream society and the way that Canada wants to do things, they always seem to want to go really fast. But it's just not going to work like that. And they have to get real about making these relationships, and they have to get real about creating bonds and creating trust and learning how to communicate.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Adam. Did you want to add anything to that, Jessica?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we've been seeing is people talking out of both sides of their mouth, and it's really hard to convince clients and Ontario Works administrators to use programs that are being delivered by these corporate entities that are talking outside of both sides of their mouth. So they're approving, for example, energy projects, but then they're out of the other side, they're saying, well, we want Indigenous engagement and we're going to go out and we're going to support you guys. But there was no consultation on the first one. So it's really difficult to get people to buy into these programs. And I know it's different in some of the other regions in Canada. But from an Ontario perspective, when these corporations are generally the ones that are delivering programs, and there's really, they're going to deliver it so that it's in the best interests of all Ontarians and not necessarily in the best interests of that First Nations community. So that's the kinds of things we're seeing and we're hearing from our members. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple questions in the question and answer box about partnerships, specifically Indigenous clean energy. And I know we've got some Indigenous clean energy on the staff on the call today. So yeah, people are just curious about what partnerships you're building, how you're working, and are there partnerships that you still feel like you need to build more?
Oh, probably there's going to be, I mean, we're 8 months old, right? 8 months, something like that. We're aware of ICE, very aware of ICE. Spoken to them on through a research project, and actually said, give us a shout back when you have time to have a chat. We don't have a necessarily partnership with them. And the work we do is a little different as well. They're very much about making sure First Nations are being partnered with corporations and energy projects and big picture stuff. And we're very much about a and we're not political. We will never be a political organization. We're very much about advocacy and figuring out how to get the most vulnerable people in Canada what they need when it comes to insulation, like very basic things. It's about how this actually plays out on the ground and how this affects, you know, the end user or that First Nations client in community. So yes, there needs to be some work around. We need to have some more conversations with ICE for sure, and we will, but that hasn't occurred at this point.
Yeah, I mean, totally fair. Setting up an organization takes probably more than 8 months, I'm guessing. So thank you. Okay, so we have a question. So someone is working essentially for energy. They're working on a project for energy efficiency training for Indigenous friendship centers, and they're wondering how they can get in touch for some advice or feedback on their work. Is that something that you or Anwa provide?
We could, as long as it's not extensive, but it might actually tell them to give us, like, reach out to Adam or I. Adam, I can't for the life of me remember what your Ishkoday email address is. So maybe you could type it in the chat. If we're not run off our feet, we will absolutely get back to you, or we'll just be honest and say, we don't have time to do this review. The curriculum that we've been working on, though, I just want to say, is very much about living and working in First Nations communities. Whereas friendship seminars, some of them will be rural and remote, but the majority of them will be located in urban centers. So I'm not 100, but absolutely willing to have a chat with you.
Fantastic. So maybe I guess just an extension of that question, How can people help if they work in the energy generation, energy efficiency sector? We do have quite a few practitioners on the call today. So, how can they help? Is it working with organizations like yours? Is it encouraging their organizations to move deeper into the space? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there needs to be a lot of work done in First Nations communities, but it needs to have a trust relationship. So before you go guns a-blazing, because I know everybody wants to help, make sure like you reach out to that First Nations community and you understand who they are and you understand what their needs are, because there's 533 plus communities in Canada, and each one of them are very, very unique. So what Sandy Lake, Ontario needs versus what Neoshingaming in Southern Ontario needs are very different. You can't, there's no apples and apples here. Just because you're a First Nations community, there's not necessarily similarities. There is some, but there's lots of differences because we have we're our own governments and we have our own structures. So honestly, there's lots of work to be done on this area. So if you really want to do meaningful work, whether it be, so on a national scale, ICE is around, we're around on a provincial scale in Ontario, and one day, hopefully in 50 years, we'll be branched out, but we're not there yet. Absolutely reach out and work with those organizations. But if you are a smaller organization and you want to work and you have a local First Nations community, reach out to their chief and council. Tell them what it is you would like to help with and what your capacity is. Don't oversell your capacity and don't lie to them. And start creating that trust relationship. And that I guess is the answer to that question.
It sounds like I've done engagement in Alberta for a long time, and it sounds like authenticity is key. And I think that's a big part. Like if you work in an organization, make sure before you walk into a community that you're not selling your own personal credibility for your organization. Make sure your organization's authenticity is pure. I ran into that a lot of times working in Alberta with communities. So I can maybe say that as well. Sometimes your personal goals and values do not align. So that can be some internal work that you do too. Okay, so maybe not a pivot, but just some curiosity around the design of the new Greener Homes affordability program. So I think the government announced that was going to have a pretty heavy focus on, federal government, sorry, announced that it's going to have a pretty heavy focus on low-income communities. Just curious about your thoughts on that, and if you were a leader for a day, what would that look like for you?
Well, I think it would be more accessible. Yeah. And I think it really needs to look into the actual circumstances of those communities. We see so many times programs are designed, you either have to have funding up front in order to fix things, or there's this long drawn out process. The other thing is, right off the hop, translate it into Indigenous languages. English and French are not everybody's first language in this country. And when we have communities that speak their languages, surely we can do some translations so that it actually means something to them. When English isn't your first language, it's a tough language to understand. And so make it so that it's plain language. Don't use industry terms. If you really want individuals to be able to access this thing, then make it accessible. Like, gosh. Yeah. Anyway, accessibility is huge when it comes to these programs. They're just not accessible. And it's because of language, and it's because of even the writing level that some of these applications are written at. Some of them are 20 to 30 pages long. You have to have access to energy auditors, and that's the other thing. Make sure our communities, if it's going to be designed, make sure that those energy audits are available to everybody in an equal manner.
Adam, how about you? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, again, because of the the differences in geography, right? And the in community scenarios that different accesses to or different availabilities to even heating types, grid connection. There certainly needs to be that consideration. Yeah, I think that's all I got right now.
Yeah, fair. Hard to conserve energy if you don't have it in the first place. So to put it bluntly. Okay, so unfortunately we have run out of time for the day. I think we could probably stay all day and chat about this. And therefore, everyone should go to the assembly in October if they want to have these conversations in person. So we are absolutely happy to share that. We've actually got an events page, so I can put that up on our events page right away. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Oh, did you want to say something, Jessica?
Just one last thing. I noticed somebody asked about some of the research projects we have. Absolutely reach out to us. We'll send you the documents.
Awesome. Okay, so this session was recorded. If anybody is interested in viewing this after the fact, it's usually up on our YouTube channel about 1.5 weeks after the sessions. I personally am going to send this to a few different organizations that we work with. I think this was just, I know you operate mainly in Ontario, but I do think there are principles that are really important for a lot of people working in energy efficiency to understand. So I would also encourage you, if you are someone that works in energy efficiency or in the energy sector, you can share this video. I think this is a great resource. And I think more people should know what Ishkoday is doing and why they're doing it. So thank you, Jessica and Adam, for joining us today. It was absolutely wonderful to have you here. I so look forward to following your journey and working more with you in the future. And thank you, everyone. Happy Friday. We will see you again in 2 weeks.